Hi everyone, it's Chenzo from Reality Art Pod, here to look back and rank the Big Brother 27 players one last time. Here's what I'm considering: how they played the game this season, of course, but also their overall potential as a player. If they were to play again, how would they do? You'll find my list definitely does not match the boot order, and you may disagree with the order. So let me know your list in the comments. This is one last chance for us to have some chat about the season. As always, if you like the content, consider liking, subscribing, and using my link to try Paramount Plus for free. But let's dive into it. Starting with 17th, I have Amy, who I originally ranked 15th, and who was the second person voted out. Her game plan coming in was pretty much to start a girls' alliance. She starts the game accomplishing her accomplice tasks, which showed some competency, though that seemed like a layup from production. She forms the mom squad with Rachel, but ends up nominated by Vince for sticking up for Ashley in Showergate, which was a BS reason to be nominated. But she did clock that Vince was a weenie, which ended up being a phenomenal read. She survives the first vote with half the house rallying around her, but then gets nominated by Jimmy in week 2. She should not have been nominated by Jimmy. It didn't make sense for him to do that, but she also didn't try at all to talk to him. While I feel for her for having been at risk for going home 3 times in 2 weeks, if you count the accomplice task, she played way too passive a game, was pretty much never talking game, and mainly talked about her personal life and or cried. On any given season, she's going to try to start a girls alliance, not be able to win much. I just have no faith in her as a player on this show, with it being so competition based. In 16th, I have Kelly, who preseason I'd rank 16th, and she miraculously placed 7th on this program. Preseason, she seemed to just want to make friends and said she wouldn't be good at competitions. She exceeded her own expectations of herself, surviving the first few weeks by winning blockbusters and a veto when she was a house target who would have been voted out. She won her safety until the other players felt that there were other issues that needed to be taken care of. So I wish I could give her credit for her target getting smaller, but it was only because other targets got bigger. Strategically, terrible. Volunteering to go on the block week 1 was so silly, and I'm not going to forgive it because it happened to work out. She stays on the bottom for the whole season, teaming up with players that were on their last leg in the game. And when Rachel gave her an olive branch, keeping her off the block trying to work with her, she continued to trash Rachel and shut Rachel down. Kelly, are you really in the place to shoot down an alliance? Girl, be for real. So she lasted way longer than she should have. A lot of her success came from luck. She was on the bottom of my rankings pretty much all season, never had respect from the other players in the house or had any chance of winning the show, and I have no faith that she makes the jury on any other season. I only have her above Amy because she was able to win competitions to save herself. Next, I have Adrien in 15th. Preseason, I ranked him 11th. Remember his interviews where he was saying he was going to be the GOAT and the best to ever do it? And I said, you know what? What if he really is? He was all everyone was talking about. And then we never saw that side of him ever again, which in the beginning was good for his game. As he was acting so nice to everyone, I thought he was playing them all, and at some point he was going to switch it up and become Adrien that we knew before the show, but he never gets there. He's just a really nice, sweet, innocent kid, and for a minute, that really served him well. He was liked by everyone and was included in the short-lived Bond alliance that could have taken him far if his own alliance didn't put him on the block. He has so much potential in challenges, winning a blockbuster, and we were robbed. We never got to see him do the wall comp. The biggest knocks I have for him that have him so low on this list are, firstly, I think he made a whole fake personality in casting to get on the show and made a lot of bold claims. I'm sure it pisses production off when people do that, so you're not going to get any of that production favoritism throwing you a bone. I even think that's why they didn't ask him a question at the reunion. They hate Adrien. He's way too nice, too committed to being honest, saying that if he lies, he's going to let his family down, and he wants to play a good, honest, loyal game. It would have been fun in the diary room if he was laughing about playing everyone, but he just wasn't. He promised Zay his vote week 1 and was so committed to that he voted wrong and ended up being on the block for it and almost evicted in week 2. So mainly his inability to play flexibly and overcommitment to morality make me feel he doesn't have it in him to do what's needed to get ahead on any given season. In 14th, I have Zay, who preseason I ranked 14th because he didn't have a game plan, and I didn't get a great first impression of his personality. On day 1, he's suggested by Riley as a suspect to be the accomplice because his face was red as hell, which is so out of his control, and a random reason to be a suspect. And while Riley got the most votes, Riley's name was cleared, making Zay an easy nomination for Vince. Once he's on the block, Morgan comes at him hard, targeting Zay because he's good at chess. He's ultimately evicted in a split vote by a vote of 9-5. So let's unpack this. The good of his game is that he does connect with people. The fact that he had Zach, Adrien, Keanu, Will, and Kelly backing him so hard that they put their games at risk to try to keep him says something, and they will all take big hits for this, as they knew they would. I still have some faith in him as a competitor, where on any given season, he's probably not nominated week 1, and the fight with Rachel never happens. On that fight with Rachel, that all happened because he said he would nominate people who voted to evict him, which is such a fair thing to say. Rachel was just looking for a fight with him to try to save Amy. Those are the redeeming qualities, but it still goes back to the original issue where he just doesn't know what to do in the game. He connects with the men, he has difficulty connecting with women. So while I don't think he's always the first boot, I think it's hard to get ahead when you really can't connect with one whole gender, and he almost always ends up getting into scuffles with the women, which still doesn't make me feel like he's a good player. But I have him above Adrien because I think he's capable of attempting to play the game. In 13th, I have Catherine. I had so much hope for her preseason, ranking her 4th overall. I thought this group of women was so much much stronger than the men by and large, and I still stand by that. The feeds come on and she's like not there. The first week, it was impossible to find her. She committed her vote to Amy early on. I was like, you know what? My girl Kat is cooking. She's laying low, but she continues to not talk game with anyone and only hang out with Lauren and Riley, which made the other players single her out as a potential target. Her name was consistently brought up as someone they didn't want in the jury. She bought herself a little bit of time getting into the showmance with Riley. Other players were frustrated they couldn't target her because they were scared of what Riley would do. So basically, her saving grace was she was dating a crazy person, and the other players feared for their lives. She called herself a raging feminist, but then completely throws away her game for this man, almost never talking game until Riley was evicted. Some positives are she won that one veto to save herself. Being a marksman in that shuffleboard competition, she really ate with that. And in the 1 week that she was in the game without Riley, she did well in the wall comp and made good arguments to Vince. It didn't make logical sense for her to go on the block in the first place. I continue to have hope for a redemption arc after Riley left, but it never came to be. And I'm realizing that all these hopes I had for her were just that, hopes, but not reality. I'd also hoped that she would have listened to her family and the fans and left this crazy toxic man, but she didn't do that either. The wasted potential is honestly depressing. And in 12th, I have Riley, who pregame I ranked 10th. Preseason, he said he was going to go with the flow and that a pretty woman would be his weakness. He gets an unlucky shake, kind of literally, when he's voted as the accomplice because he went to pee, which is so out of your control, but also it takes a lot to get to the point where you have to run to the bathroom to pee. So much of his game is his obsession with Catherine, which we've talked about, which separates them from the group so much, but Riley continues to keep his own game going, connecting with players like Mickey, Kelly, Keanu. He had a whole squad. I ranked him number 1 in week 5 when he was in between the two sides and seemed to be wrangling the bottom players to be something, but Rachel having the guts to nominate him in week 6 sniped him quickly out of the game. Socially, he's not terrible. He's got some kind of swagoo that as a viewer I'm not able to see, but in the house they were eating him up, and the other players are still chummy with him even though they do it in shame. I put him above Catherine because he acted with more agency in the game and proved to be more strategic and free thinking, but he's such a big threat in the game that on any season he's probably voted out at about the point that he was here. In 11th, I have Ava, who preseason I ranked 17th, but ended up placing 4th overall. At the time, I questioned her strategy of reading people's auras. My words at the time were she's the type of player who makes it way too far and kills this season. She greatly benefits from being picked to be a have-not and safety in week 1, where I could see her being a pawn for Vince, who could have gone home that week. We didn't see it on the feeds, but players were saying that she had a rocky start, and by the time the feeds came back on, they were like, oh, we're starting to like Ava. And she stayed just being someone people like as she played from her bunk bed like a wise owl in a cartoon. Through being a bit inactive in the game, drama formed in the house and she stayed out of it, and anytime she did weigh in on the game, players took her seriously, which led me to ranking her number 1 after the Adrien vote because she talked Zach and Vince into changing their votes. Other highlights of her game were her relationships with other players, especially Will and later Lauren. I want to say Rachel and Ashley, but she also consistently talked badly about them, but she had a pretty accurate finger on the pulse of the game throughout the season. Pitfalls that have her below other players: she's not great at competitions. I have no faith she could have won a single blockbuster that happened. She fell kind of backwards into an HOH win and made huge nominations, but then never owned the move, which made them and us forget about it. On any given season, I'd expect her to have either a run like this or be a really early boot. It doesn't help that she's never going to align with stronger competitors, and her it is what it is YOLO mentality is kind of a cover up for the fact that she's not really competitive, kind of lazy, and is just trying to win America's favorite player. In 10th, this will be unpopular to some, but I have Keanu. You may want him higher. I'm surprised I don't have him lower. I originally ranked him 13th, and he ended up in 5th, which exceeded my expectations by a lot. He gets off to a bad start in the game, being a suspect for accomplice, almost getting nominated by Vince, and voting wrong at that eviction. He goes on to be a house target for a while, leading to me placing him dead last in my rankings 5 times, and many other times when he wasn't last, he was second to last above Kelly. It's the way he's always wrong, like about nearly everything. Frustratingly so. It's the way Rachel saved him early on, and he continues to try to work with the bottom feeders in the house and puts himself on the bottom by voting wrong in 3 of the first 6 evictions. It's the way he was so reliant on competition wins and gets really lucky with the Casey veto. It's the way he continues to fight in public with Rachel, Jimmy, Ava. I'm probably missing some. And then he targets Rachel, the only person who wanted to work with him and was telling him the truth. And he continued to trust Vince until the end when he really couldn't. Through all of this, he's not doing well in the game, but he becomes an underdog that obviously a lot of people are rooting for, becoming America's favorite. And if this was a personality ranking, I would have him higher than this, as I do think he's funny, but on any given season, I don't think he makes it as far as he did here. He really did that against all odds. The positives are he's great in competitions, he's pretty competitive strategically, he does try even if he's wrong, and he did build some social connections through the game. I'd say the competitiveness alone is enough to put him above Ava for me, as if they both make it to the end, against all odds, they do have a chance of winning a jury vote, depending on how the jury's feeling, but Keanu is more capable of winning the competitions to get there. In 9th, I have Mickey, who preseason I had 3rd, and ultimately placed 10th. She starts the season on the right foot. She's in triple threat, she votes in the majority, and it's funny that she's listed as an affiliate of heavy hitters, actress on Wikipedia, as she was brought in basically as their spare tire. In the beginning, she was playing and playing well. It seemed like she was running the game. Things really started to fall apart when she won that power, which was supposed to be secret, but she was jumping up and down celebrating, which I still knock her for. She and Morgan lose trust for Jimmy because he was hanging out with Lauren and Catherine. They didn't like his antics, or maybe they didn't like that he was stealing the camera time, but this started the anti-Jimmy sentiment, while at the same time Mickey and Morgan were mistrusting each other, which wasn't really highlighted as there was so much going on at the time. Everyone seems to know that Mickey has her power, but she somehow still tricks Riley into stealing his HOH, which I thought was going to be the start of her success story, but really became her downfall, targeting Jimmy and going on such a power trip in HOH where she was talking down to everyone, especially Ashley, who she was such a bad friend to and so mean to all the time. Through this week, she makes herself look bad and effectively loses the game, but she's able to win some competitions and stick around for a few weeks, and is just wasting space in the house from her HOH on, being very delusional about her spot in the game. Like Keanu, she thinks she's running the game until her ultimate eviction, which shocked her. While there are a lot of negatives to her game, there are some positives. She's able to make friends on both sides of the house. Like I said, she teed herself up with alliances to do well in the game. Similar to Keanu, she was able to win competitions, but comparing them, Mickey at her best is better than Keanu at his best. And even though she was wrong about a lot, she has a delusional level of confidence that I honestly envy. In 8th, I'm putting Zach, who pre-game I ranked 9th. He finishes 13th on the show. He gets off to a strong start, being a standout of the premiere, saving Julie from the mastermind, through that winning $10,000 and his secret power. He didn't have much knowledge of Big Brother, but had good instincts to keep the power a secret and not blab to his friends. And he did make quick friends, getting along well with everyone in the house, not just socially but also strategically, being involved in big alliances like Heavy Hitters and the short-lived Bond Alliance. He also had Morgan, Ashley, and Lauren all in love with him at one time, and he's able to spread information around the house, like warning Ashley about Showergate without getting penalized for it at all. All of this combined had him first in my rankings for week 2 and 4. But in week 5, he finds himself on the block during Ava's HOH and decides not to use his power in a decision that was ridiculously dumb. Like, so dumb. He absolutely should have saved himself in this spot. So obviously this is an all-time mistake and fall from grace for someone who had so much going for him. His rationale was he didn't want to reward Ava with $10,000 for nominating him, wanted to protect Morgan, and I think he thought he could beat Keanu in a blockbuster. I originally had him below Keanu and Mickey when I was writing this, and after thinking about it, he made one really big mistake, but for the most part was in a good spot, but they made more mistakes that also ruined their games, but over a long period of time, like a slow bleed. But on any given season, I would expect Zach to get into the majority alliance with the strong competitors and make good friends. I would hope he learned something from this to do better on a return, and he's far less delusional than those two players, so him being grounded for the most part in reality would have him higher than Keanu and Mickey. In 7th, I have Will, who preseason I ranked 8th, ending up finishing 8th. Pre-game, I was confident he'd be respected as a person in the house, but worried that he wouldn't be respected as a player. Being safe the first week gave him room to form bonds, making quick friends with Ava, Ashley, Mickey, his daughters in the game. He started to fall into the pawn position, getting nominated week 2 and 3. I like that he stood up for himself and said that he's not cool with going on the block over and over, getting very upset the second time, which helped to gain that respect in the game. There's so much good here. He's got great social game. He knows what's going on in the house and gets into the judges alliance that ultimately ran the second half of the game with some hiccups. He's very affected by the White Locust twist, where feeling like the show was going to become all about challenges deflated him, and rightfully so. So he was understanding when he was evicted over Ashley. Had he stayed, he probably would have had the same trajectory as Ashley, but there was no way he would win part 1 or 2 of the final HOH, and they would have cut him, which just goes to show that this show is a million times harder for an older player, which is why we continue to see young, fit people win the show. While I really enjoy him, I feel on any season he probably does go out around this point in the game, and a lot of it isn't his fault and is more an indictment on the show than on him. In 6th, I have Jimmy, who preseason I ranked 6th, but he plays 14th. Jimmy had a great start to the game. He won the first competition that set Vince up to win HOH. In turn, he was safe and formed triple threat and was in Heavy Hitters. In the beginning, I was annoyed that he was targeting Rachel, but it was nice to see them ending up being good friends and allies. He had connections all over the house, even bonding with Catherine and Lauren for a bit, but he's undone by Mickey and Morgan deciding to turn on him. Their turning on him was very premature. They should have spoken with him and cleared up their issues before deciding to cut him. It all seemed a bit malicious to me, and by the time he found out what they were doing, it was too late. All he could do was put on his chapstick. He was so hurt by Mickey's nomination, and he lost his spark for a bit. He was deflated, not causing a scene at ceremonies anymore. It really got to him. He's smart, fun, the other players enjoy the performances he puts on, and he's strategic and grounded in reality. The biggest thing I question about Jimmy is his actual commitment to the game, where I don't think we saw a version of Jimmy that was actually trying to win the show, but that he was more auditioning for a career in reality TV, trying to make memorable moments that someone who was really trying to win the show may not have done, which I can't really hate on. I left off feeling like he'd be fun on other shows. I think he's a production's dream, and I have him high on the list because I think if he applied himself more, he could do really well. In 5th, I have Lauren, who preseason I ranked 7th. She ends up placing 6th. She starts the season off rocky, being a swing vote between Zay and Amy week 1, stringing the girls along and being indecisive decisive, only to end up voting with the girls and then choosing to work with the guys after that. Her indecisiveness becomes a whole trend, waiting until the last minute to decide on pretty much everything in the pre-jury phase, which annoyed fans and the other players. But I was a bit of a Lauren defender. She does play scared, but she does it from a place of self-preservation and plays it safe. I think a typical strategy of playing safe and laying low in the pre-jury is usually good, but this pre-jury phase lasted such a long time, almost the whole season. It felt like she couldn't do right by anyone. When she won the HOH and played it safe, it was an issue. When she won the veto and decided to use it on Vince, it was a different issue. I think her saving her number one ally in Vince with the veto was rational at the time, but she accidentally set off a chain of events that would lead to all of her allies going home and Vince eventually nominating her. While there are negatives, there are also positives. I think she's a logical thinker, at times overthinking it, but at least her brain is operational. She wins HOH week 9, takes a shot at Morgan, which was the right move for her to make. If she gets Morgan out of there, it's a different story. Morgan was always coming for her and would continue to come for her. Lauren puts up a good fight in a strategic tug of war against Morgan with Vince going back and forth about nominating Lauren. She doesn't give in, she stays strong on the topic, telling him he can't nominate her and that it would be stupid. And when she is nominated that round, she saves herself in the blockbuster against Keanu and Kelly, which was impressive. But that Morgan HOH did her in, taken out by her rival, and in the end, she votes for Ashley to win the game, which got her more respect from me. After how he dogged her, had she voted for Vince to win, I would have seen her as more of a weakling, but from what I've seen, she's a strategic thinker. She greatly suffered from being 22 years old, the youngest person on this cast, which I do take into account as I think to some degree she was thrown to the wolves, but she held her own. In fourth, I have Vince, who preseason I ranked 5th, feeling like he had potential, but cautious that it was just the moustache fooling me. There are two phases to his game, where in the beginning he was doing well, but then it falls apart. It starts with him winning the first HOH, targeting Ashley and gaslighting her about it, which was a bit of a mess, but he got away with it when his pal Jimmy wins the next HOH, giving him space to recover and weasel his way into multiple groups, making promises to everyone and not getting caught. With Lauren winning the third HOH, he's pretty much had HOH for the first 3 weeks, where Jimmy just recycled his nominations and Lauren did pretty much everything he said. He's on the block week 5 and gets a ton of support, surviving the eviction, and in week 6 when he convinced Lauren to save him with the veto, to me that was the peak of his game, and that was the week when I ranked him number 1. Week 7, to me this is the beginning of his downfall. He wins the wall comp and doesn't want to pick a side, so he spends the whole week waffling. This was his chance to nominate Rachel. Through this waffling, he signals to Rachel that he's thinking of nominating her, but then he ultimately does end up siding with the judges and using this HOH to nominate Catherine. Like, why? In this process, he just showed everyone he's a mess. The next few rounds, also messy. He's on the block, then Morgan convinces him to evict Will over Ashley, which didn't make sense for him. Then he wins HOH and Morgan convinces him to nominate Lauren. To me, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, at this point, there was no way he could win the game. And then he burns Keanu and Ava on the way out to put a cherry on top, and he spends his final week having a mentee be for the entire week. So you have the dynamic story of someone who at some point was running the game, but then got run by everyone and the game. And while I think him being a weenie and a pushover was what ultimately caused this downfall, he's aware of the game. He's even aware of when he's doing things that are bad, and I think his self-preservation instinct and selfishness do make him to some degree a good player. He did survive in the game to the final 2, and is very capable of winning competitions. I don't want to see him play again, but I think after some time to reflect, he would still play selfishly, and maybe not let everyone push him around. Getting to the top 3, who for me were pretty interchangeable. In third, I have Ashley, who I originally ranked 2nd and ultimately won the season. We went on such a journey with Ashley, with her being a standout frontrunner in the preseason as our hidden lawyer, only for her to get nominated week 1 as the target just for taking a shower, which was dumb because Vince promised her safety, then went back on it and gaslit her. She wins the first veto, which was clutch. She could have gone home that week. She gets into the trio with Rachel and Amy, but I tracked a lot more strategic play in my notes than I realized, like Ashley flip-flopping on the vote right before the first eviction. In the next few weeks, she starts being talked about as inconsiderate by the other players. They're annoyed by things she does around the house, which she'll later claim she was doing on purpose, but I don't know about that. All of this makes her a name that's often brought up as a replacement nominee. There are a few times when other players convince an HOH not to nominate Ashley. She could have been nominated by Lauren, but she marches right up to Lauren and assumptively says, "It's amazing that you're not putting me up. Thank you so much, Lauren. You're the best." And it worked. When Mickey was being the Mictator, she was being so nasty to Ashley, giving Ashley the cold shoulder, and Ashley worked and worked to get Mickey to open up to her and eventually wore her down and got her to be friendly with her again. Around week 5, she's in a spot where she's not being targeted anymore, which allows her to get more active in the game and bond with some other players. She helps to establish the Judges Alliance, which greatly benefited her. I was so impressed that she was able to flip the vote to stay over Will. When Rachel and Will left, she had Ava, but was largely seen as a lone player in the game, which helped her to bond with Keanu, Kelly, pull Ava in closer. She really was turning enemies into allies. And in the final week, she puts in the work to convince Morgan to take her to the final 2, and ultimately made the move to cut Morgan, and has a very impressive performance in final 2 that was helped by her having already warmed up the jury with her social game. Ashley will probably be remembered as a social player, but she's way more strategic than many give her credit for. She was working so hard through the whole season, slowly climbing up my rankings from 11th place week 1 to 2nd place week 11. 27. While I'm very high on her game, the first few weeks were rocky, and she was targeted and was annoying the other house guests. So I'd say the rocky start, and the fact that she at times is a difficult person to live with, and that she gravitates to the weaker players in the game, makes me feel like on any season I could see her joining up with the underdogs and not seeing the same results that she saw here. I debated over the top two. In the end, in second, I settled on Rachel, who I ranked 12th preseason, but at the time she was just mystery house guest. I felt whoever the mystery house guest was would be good in competitions and strategy, but singled out as the only returnee. No matter what, this person would have a huge uphill battle to win the game. And the one returnee being a winner was a bit of a ridiculous workload. She has a rough start, being a target for Jimmy and fighting with Keanu and Zay as early as the first week. In my rankings, she was at her peak after the second eviction. When I ranked her second, this was when she made the final two with Ava and started her keep me around and beat me in the end campaign. She bonds with players like Ashley, Amy, Will, Ava. Credit to her during these early weeks for bringing Jimmy and Keanu closer to her. She comes into week 6 likely to be nominated and even evicted, but wins that HOH. That HOH was a roller coaster, and she still ended up somehow in a majority alliance with her nominees by the end of the week. Coming into the White Locust round, she's strapped up with allies, but she's a bit frantic in that round and panics in the competition. I do keep to. I'm always going to wonder how this season would have played out had it just been a regular Big Brother round of gameplay, and we were robbed of that, which makes her game a bit difficult to assess. On one hand, she's way more experienced than the rest of the cast. Add on to that, she's a super fan of the show and works in production, so she just gets it and is able to explain what's going on to others in a way that they have no choice but to listen to. And she's won the show, so yes, I can see the comments already. How do you not have winners as number one? But we've seen a lot of Rachel. She's one of the most entertaining, but also flawed. I put Rachel above Ashley because Rachel went out of her way so many times to protect Ashley, and there are times when Rachel did a better job helping Ashley than Ashley did to help herself. And while I have Rachel higher than most of this cast for her skills and overall resume, I can't fault the rest of the cast because it was their first season, and comparing the events of the season and the stats, I couldn't deny my number one of their slot. So let's get to number one, in Morgan, who pregame I ranked first, a former D1 athlete and gamer with a plan of lying about her job and laying low. The game starts and she's not laying low. Like, she didn't tell them she was a gamer, but she's definitely playing Big Brother hard from day one. She spends the whole first week pushing Zay to go, and he goes. She sees value in Rachel and is shown to be the one making the decision for triple threat not to target her. Morgan's in heavy hitters and triple threat. She's got a good start, but she's not subtle. Her pre-merge was shaky. She spends week 2 campaigning for Amy to stay and fails. There's grumblings around the house that she's trying to run the game. She's involved in Jimmy's eviction, which is messy, but at that point she was hitching her wagon to Zach and Vince, and she gets very distracted and obsessed with Zach, which is also the origin of her rivalry with Lauren. She's nominated as Rachel's target week 6 and is nearly evicted, but she works really hard and survives a vote of 5-4. At that point, the viewer's sentiment toward Morgan had become so negative, including from me, but week 6 into week 7 is a major tonal shift where she ends up getting Vince in on the Judges Alliance, which got all of her ducks in a row. So she's in this great spot in the game and has such a dominant run, winning safety from the final 10 until the final 3. She survives a Lauren HOH, then controls back-to-back HOHs, and is basically HOH from top 7 to top 4, only to choke in the final HOH and be smartly evicted by Ashley. I really weighed out the Morgan, Rachel, Ashley top 3. This order was tough, but ultimately I feel like Morgan was on her first reality TV appearance and almost fully packaged player day one. You could bypass casting her on this season and throw her on a cast with all veteran players, and she holds her own. All 3 of these top players play very messily, and all 3 had a rough start to the game, but Morgan, being so smart and so athletic, gives her a higher chance of evading a sticky situation. I also took into account my rankings throughout, where I never had Rachel or Ashley in my number 1 slot. Pre-game, week 1, week 7, and weeks 9, 10, and 11. I can't even say it's favoritism because I wanted Ashley to win over her in the end, but I have to give her credit for a very dominant run. So those are my rankings for Big Brother 27. I'm sure yours are different than mine. I love to see your rankings in the comments. I read and respond to every comment. If you like the video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. I'm going to be back for Big Brother 28, but right now I'm recapping Survivor and the challenge. So until next time, you know where to find me. Bye.